59 present, 6 excused. We do have a quorum. Representative Foray.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the Journal of Monday, February 24th, 2025 be approved as corrected by the wonderful Chief Clerk.
Members, you've heard the motion that the Journal be approved as corrected by the wonderful Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no? The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Members, we are proceeding to business. I will ask everyone to take their seats. Members, we are on third reading of bills. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to lay over House Bill 1043 until tomorrow.
House Bill 1043 will be laid over until tomorrow. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1162.
House Bill 1162 by Representative Foray, also Senator Doherty, concerning redetermination of eligibility for individuals enrolled in the State Medical Assistance Program.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1162 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1162 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Barone, Bottoms, Espinoza, Sukla, Weinberg. Please. Please close the machine. With 56 aye, 4 no, and 5 excused, House Bill 1162 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1007.
House Bill 1007 by Representatives Froelich and Valdez, also Senators Winter and Simpson, concerning emergency preparedness for paratransit services.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1007 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1007 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. AML Bacon. Please close the machine. With 44 ayes, 17 no, and 4 excused, House Bill 1007 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1040.
House Bill 1040 by Representatives Valdez and Winter, also Senators Roberts and Liston, concerning the inclusion of nuclear energy as a source of clean energy.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1040 on third reading and final passage.
the motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1040 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 43 aye, 18 no, and 4 excused, House Bill 1040 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 82.
Senate Bill 82 by Senators Gonzalez, J., and Frizzell, also Representative Joseph and Soper, concerning the enactment of the Colorado Revised Statutes 2024 as the positive and statutory law of the state of Colorado.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 82 on third reading and final passage.
the motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 82 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 51 aye, 10 no, 4 excused, Senate Bill 82 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Bill 1110.
House Bill 1110 by Representatives Winter and Duran, also Senator Pelton B., concerning the allocation of costs to maintain railroad crossings in the state.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1110 on third reading and final passage.
the motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1110 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Carter Clifford. Please close the machine. With 53 aye, 8 no, 4 excused, House Bill 1110 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Bill 1133.
House Bill 1133 by Representatives Duran and Gilchrist, also Senators Amabile and Kipp, concerning requirements for the retail sale of ammunition for firearms and in connection therewith, establishing requirements for the delivery of ammunition sold at retail.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1133 on third reading and final passage.
Madam Majority Leader,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request permission to offer a third reading amendment. We have an amendment to address some technical fixes and placements in the bill.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. The question before us is permission to run a third reading amendment on House Bill 1133. Representative Caldwell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment addresses the amendment that I ran on second reading, where we exclude rimfire ammunition, which is a good amendment. This amendment, new amendment, just cleans it up, and so it just makes one big reference that applies to the entire bill. So I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is permission to run a third reading amendment on House Bill 1133. Mr. Shebo, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Oh, sorry, folks. We're going to pause for one moment. The amendment has not been properly displayed. Oh, sorry. My bad. I'm getting ahead of myself. Mr. Shebo, please open the machine. It is. Please vote. Garcia, Taggart, Valdez. Please close the machine. With 56 aye, 5 no, 4 excused, permission to run a third reading amendment is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move amendment L046 and ask for it to be properly displayed. 047. Madam Speaker, I move amendment L047 and ask that it be properly displayed.
It is properly displayed, although a little blurry. Perfect. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This technical amendment renumbers accordingly and removes then subsequently re-adds the exemption we made during seconds for rimfire ammunition to correct the section, and I ask for a yes vote.
Seeing no further conversation, the motion before us is the adoption of L047 to House Bill 1133. Mr. Shebo, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 60 aye, 1 no, and 4 excused, the amendment is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move House Bill 1133 as amended on third reading and final passage.
That is a proper motion. Representative Brooks.
Good morning, Madam Speaker.
Good morning.
And good morning, colleagues. I am going to touch briefly on some comments that I had on this when we were on seconds. I serve on proudly, the Business Affairs and Labor Committee, the committee of reference for this bill. I was a little concerned that we didn't necessarily have the representation there as the committee is comprised. We didn't necessarily give it a fair shake, to my estimation, in committee. And I believe that all the work that has been done on this, on the floor here, to try to make it better is something that we probably deserve to have back in committee for the Business Affairs and Labor, to have those members, those assigned members, have an opportunity to be able to see it and work it through. I believe the amendments are, obviously a tremendous amount of work went into them. And so I, Madam Speaker, then under 9A5 of House Rules, would motion House Bill 1133 as amended back to the Committee of Reference, the Business Affairs Labor Committee.
That is a proper motion. Representative DeGraff.
I would also like to send this bill, to return this bill to from whence it came. So yes, I support this motion.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is to refer House Bill 1133 to the Committee of Reference, Business Affairs and Labor. Mr. Schiebel, please. Oh. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 22 aye, 39 no, and 4 excused, the motion is lost. Representative Armagost.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we are back with this one again to really discuss what direction we're going and why we're going in this direction. I think the most concerning thing to me is that we talk about amnesty in this state. I think the issue of firearms and ammunition is we're making Wyoming an amnesty state for people to purchase firearms and ammunition. We're sending people there to get groceries. We're sending people there to get fuel. We're sending people there to get all of their necessities as well as firearms and ammunition. I'm sure the governor of Wyoming appreciates us. I'm sure the taxpayers of Wyoming appreciate us. But at the same time, we're pushing that revenue, we're pushing those businesses, including my friend in Berthoud, out of Colorado. We're pushing all of that out of Colorado. And this isn't the only issue that we're doing that with. It's just another entity of business that we're pushing out of Colorado. With all of the bills that we're seeing, holding businesses liable and causing them to raise prices and this and that, we are ruining revenue in this state by constantly going after any level of business or any way of doing business that we as a body disagree with. And this is the most troubling to me because it is not fixing the problem to which it is apparently intended to fix. I don't like the idea that we're calling this a public safety bill. We've addressed public safety in this building as far as firearms are concerned, and it didn't kill businesses. It actually protects businesses. When we're talking about penalties for theft and things like that, we are protecting businesses by doing that. This is not protecting anyone except for Wyoming's businesses and Wyoming's revenue. And that, to me, is very frustrating and shameful. I know we can come together on ideas that promote safety and promote ways of reducing violence where guns and ammunition are used, but we're going about it in completely wrong ways. Not only are we holding businesses accountable and revenue for Colorado hostage, but we're also affecting consumers in this level because now people have to go out of state to spend their money on things that they need to protect themselves, things that they need for sporting and recreation, things that they need for basic necessities and groceries. But as it pertains to this, I think the biggest thing that I am concerned with is simply we're blaming the tool rather than the person, and everyone is paying for that. When we aren't holding the person accountable and we're holding the tool accountable, the tool is an inanimate object, as is a vehicle, as is a chemical, as is anything that can be used to cause harm to other people by a person that is mentally ill or otherwise violent or evil. I think if we aren't willing to send this back to committee, the only way to fix this is to prevent it from going any further in the legislature. And in doing that, we have to vote no today. Today is our opportunity to fix this before it moves forward, and that is the only way of doing that. Again, this is a message we're sending to our people, our citizens in Colorado that are aged 18 to 21. And it's telling them, you're too stupid to do anything but vote and join the military. Everything that we're doing and banning people that are 18 to 21 years old from doing anything, we're telling them, you're not competent or capable enough to make decisions as an adult, and we're going to hold you to that. We're going to make a law that says you cannot. But you are smart enough to vote and join the military, which is an insult and a slap in the face to me, and I can definitely speak for many of my fellow veterans over here. Like I said before, I joined the military at 17. Best decision I ever made for myself. I started voting when I was 18. It's the best opportunity I've ever been able to have. But I also owned firearms since I was 12. Didn't kill anybody. None of my guns got away from me and killed anybody or harmed anybody. None of my ammunition, none of my cartridges escaped my control and harmed or killed anybody. Hunting, yes. Providing for my family and myself, yes. But here we are punishing people for an ideology that we think is going to fix violence and otherwise improve public safety. But it does the opposite. This just forces people to go out of state and give our revenue to other states, especially the one closest to us, to get all of these things. But it also puts many of our good Coloradans that have worked hard their entire life to provide for their families out of the state, mostly to Wyoming. Wyoming welcomes them with open arms. I know they offer businesses bonuses. They offer them moving. They will move businesses to Wyoming with a startup bonus for you to start a business there. Why? Because Colorado chases them right up there. Open arms. And this is another bill that does that. I've seen 3 in the last 2 weeks that are going to do that exact thing. And it's going to be one of those things where years down the road, hopefully sooner than later, we're going to have another correction bill going, holy cow, look what we did. We need to fix this. Fixing it is today. Fixing it is right now. Pushing your red button when it comes time to vote for bills like this. You have to vote no on these things. We have to preserve our state, not continue to dismantle our state, our businesses, our revenue, our public safety, and overall quality of life in Colorado. It's shameful. I will definitely be a no vote, and I encourage you to do the same.
Representative Caldwell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise against this bill as well, and I will be a no vote, but I want to give a little bit of an explanation here. So some of you may be surprised to know that not all Republicans are all against all bills that have to involve firearms. Just last week in committee, we passed a bill that involved firearms, and it passed with 4 Republican votes and 2 Democrat votes. And what that bill does was actually held criminals accountable for the misuse of firearms. So don't think that myself, and I don't want to speak for others, but don't think we're against all firearm bills. We are against some firearm bills when it involves the misuse of them and the criminal aspects of that. This bill, in my opinion, and in many of my constituents' opinions, is unconstitutional. Now, I know we throw that word around a lot, but we do have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Now, this bill targets ammunition, and what I ask you is, what is a firearm without ammunition? It's just a piece of metal. So when we say this is unconstitutional, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're saying that if you have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, you also have that constitutional right to have the ammunition for that firearm, because without the ammunition, the firearm is nothing. It's just an inanimate object, which it is either way, but it's useless without the ammunition. So when we talk about it being unconstitutional, you need to understand where we're coming from on that. And this is not just my opinion. Just on January 30th of 2025 of this year, less than a month ago, there was a federal court ruling on this exact issue on the federal side of things, which we can assume is going to cover the states as well. And so what I worry about is we're passing a bill that is going to be overruled, and I have no doubt that this bill, there's going to be a lawsuit about this, and how much is it going to cost the state to try to defend a bill that I think most of us know is unconstitutional? That's going to have a real cost to this state, and we could fix it right now by just voting no on it, and we should. The other opposition I have to it is something that my colleague had just talked about, which is society has determined that 18 years of age is what determines you to be an adult. That was made long before I was born, but that's been the case. And as my colleague talked about, our society says you can vote when you're 18. If you commit a crime, you can go to jail, you can go to prison, and you can live on your own when you're 18. And what we're doing with this bill right now, if we pass this bill with these age restrictions, we are saying that you are responsible enough and you are old enough to live on your own, but you are not responsible enough or old enough to defend yourself. You can have an apartment, you can have a house, you can move around the country freely on your own at 18, but you cannot defend yourself because you need the ammunition to defend yourself. That's just the reality of it. Now, I am happy that we did an amendment to give an exclusion to the military. But I do have an issue with that. As somebody who served in the military, my issue with that is there's no asterisk in the Constitution. There's no asterisk next to the Second Amendment that says this constitutional right applies to you if you decide to serve in the military. That's a constitutional right we all have. It reminds me of a conversation I was having with my dad back when I served in the military. And I don't remember the exact subject. It may have been about guns, it may have been about free speech. And he had mentioned to me, well, especially for you because you serve in the military. And I told him, I said, Dad, no, that's not the way I look at it. I didn't join the military to somehow unlock additional constitutional rights. Those constitutional rights were already there for everybody. I served in the military to support and defend those constitutional rights, not to gain access to additional rights. That's not the way the Constitution works. But with this bill, that's what we're saying. We're saying that unless you serve in the military, you don't get that constitutional right when you turn 18. And that's not right to me. Something else that I spoke about on second reading is the burden on small businesses. I have some small gun stores in my district, and we try to run an amendment on this that said if you're 1,000 square foot or less gun store, that you would be exempted from these ammunition storage regulations, and this chamber voted that down. Now remember, if you are 1,000 square foot or less gun store, like one of the ones I have in Falcon, Colorado, you're most likely a family-owned business, like the one that I have in Falcon, Colorado. And you're already struggling, and you may not have the space to meet the regulations of this bill. Yet, we had the opportunity here on Friday to exempt those small businesses, and we didn't. We didn't. And it was so easy for us to do that, we didn't do it. And then the last point I'll make about this is the cost to consumers. When we add these regulations on delivery of ammunition, who does that affect? If you're rich, that doesn't affect you. If you have the money, what do you care if a box of ammo is $1 more? That doesn't apply to you. That applies to the people who already are having a hard time purchasing ammunition for whatever reasons they want to purchase ammunition. So when we pass laws in here, we're hurting the people who we should be wanting to help. And certainly the criminals, they don't care what the new regulations are on storing or delivering ammunition. They're getting it illegally anyways because they're criminals and that's what they do. So with that, I just want to say one last time, I urge no vote on this bill. This is not right for Colorado. This is not the Western way of life, and it just feels like the continued Californication of our state. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is truly a privilege to work in this building. It's a wondrous building. This is tremendous chamber. This is not the way most people in Colorado live. This is not the environment that most people in Colorado work in. Most people live their own individual lives, a lot of them in ways that many of the folks here can't imagine. I was up at about 4 a.m. this morning because since I work here, my wife has to take care of chores at home. She brought in a load of hay yesterday, got stuck in the mud. Didn't want to tell me about it. She took the pickup and kept it at home. I took her car in yesterday. So I was up at 4 a.m. because we had enough time for the ground to freeze so I could get it out and move it back up towards the barn so she can unload it today while I'm here today. So while I'm here today, I really want to be doing good things for the people of Colorado. My colleagues on this side of the aisle spent a bit of time on Friday providing input regarding this bill on seconds. While some amendments were accepted, making this a marginally less worse bill, it remains fatally flawed and should receive a no vote today. I do hope that all of you spent some time thinking about the valid concerns expressed by many of us here in the well during that lengthy conversation we had on Friday. But in case you have forgotten the issues we raised, and a few of them were brought up again, I do want to recap, because we have a tremendous responsibility today to decide whether this flawed bill moves over to the Senate or it dies rightfully here on the floor. I am in strong opposition of 1133. It is a bill that is nothing more than a solution in search of a problem. There are true problems out there. This doesn't address them. It represents yet another example of government overreach, adding unnecessary regulation to businesses, already drowning in compliance costs and bureaucratic red tape. Instead of allowing hardworking Coloradans to thrive, this legislation imposes yet another layer of restrictions. Restrictions that'll do nothing to solve the real problems, but will certainly create new ones, and we'll be back looking at other bills trying to fix those problems in the future, I have no doubt. The bill is an attack on law-abiding businesses, owners who are simply trying to operate within the bounds of law. It introduces new criminal penalties, turning honest business people into criminals overnight for just engaging in practices that were previously legal. At a time when our state is struggling with skyrocketing crime rates and a revolving door justice system that fails to hold violent offenders accountable, why are we focused on efforts on punishing entrepreneurs and job creators? This is exactly the wrong priority for Colorado in this chamber. Furthermore, as discussed earlier, the bill infringes on the rights of legal adults aged 18 to 21. We trust these young men and women to vote, sign contracts, serve in the military, yet this legislation treats them as second-class citizens, stripping them of the ability to make decisions for themselves. If we believe at all in personal responsibility and individual liberty, things that as a government we're supposed to be protecting, we must be consistent in our approach. You cannot call someone an adult when it's convenient and then deny them that status when it does not fit a particular political agenda. But the dangers of this bill go far beyond regulation and constitutional violations. It tramples on our Western heritage, a heritage built on independence, responsibility, and self-reliance. This bill is especially dangerous for those of us who farm and ranch, people who live miles from their nearest neighbor, let alone law enforcement. Out on the eastern plains or the western slope and across our rural communities, we cannot afford to wait for help to arrive when danger's at the doorstep. We must have the tools necessary to defend ourselves, our families, and our livestock from threats, whether it be from criminals, dangerous predators, or any other harm that might come our way. Our way of life depends on self-sufficiency, and this legislation undermines that core principle. The bill ignores the reality of rural living and dismisses the needs of those that work the land, feed this nation, and uphold the values that built Colorado. I, for one, did not come to Denver to make life harder for the people who make Colorado strong. And if this wasn't bad enough, the bill, especially in its amended form, now blatantly violates the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution by imposing different legal standards on otherwise similar groups. It creates an arbitrary and discriminatory distinction within the law. Such a provision is ripe for legal challenge, and if passed, it's not going to hold up in court. We heard earlier, and I'll repeat, similar laws restricting rights of those within this age group have been struck down by the Fifth Circuit Court. It'll likely suffer the same fate if this bill is brought before the 10th, if not before the Supreme Court, before it even gets there and becomes the law of the land and makes this whole exercise moot. Why are we passing legislation when we already know it's constitutionally flawed? This is not just poor governance, it's irresponsible and a waste of taxpayer resources. At the end of the day, Colorado Bill 25-1133 is something that no one asked for, that fixes nothing and punishes law-abiding citizens. It tramples on our constitutional rights and our Western way of life. We do not need more regulation, more government interference, and more criminal penalties for people that are simply trying to live their lives, run their businesses, and protect their families. What we need is common sense, and common sense says this bill must be rejected. So I urge you to stand up for the individuals, for your communities, for the freedom of our businesses, for the freedom of our rural Coloradans, and for constitutional governance. And just do the right thing and vote no today on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Kelty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think my colleagues did a great job, basically explaining the Constitution. Everyone should be familiar with how it is against the Constitution, how it infringes on the Second Amendment. They did a great job doing that. But I want to bring up something a little different. I want you to think and answer to yourself and your constituents this question. How does this bill protect those between 18 and 20 from domestic violence? Our domestic violence victims are out there, and they are between the age of 18 and 20. They don't have protective orders, but they are still victims. Bad people will always get their hands on a gun, an illegal gun. The good people, those who are domestic violence survivors and victims, now cannot. Now they can't even buy ammo for the guns that they actually do have. So please explain to me how you're going to explain to your 18 to 20-year-old domestic violent victims how they are going to protect themselves when the time comes that they need to. This bill will prevent that from happening. I'm here to help my constituents, especially my domestic violence victims. We need to have safety for domestic violence victims. And this bill prevents that. So ask yourself that. Explain it to your constituents who are between the age of 18 and 20, how, their situations are going to get worse because they're unable to protect themselves because of this bill. I ask for your no vote because we've got to protect those who are most vulnerable, and this bill is taking that away from them.
Representative Garcia-Sander.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. One of the most surprising things that I found, people have asked me, what do you like most about your new job, and what have you found most interesting, most surprising? One of the most surprising things has been talking with former Democrat lawmakers who have now become lobbyists or CEOs or advisors, and they asked me about bills that we're hearing, and they reflect and share their thoughts. One of the most surprising things is they are sharing that they realize how much overregulation over the last 6 years has hurt our state and made life more expensive. From farmers to hospitals, to teachers and schools, to small businesses, I've heard them talk over and over and over again about unintended consequences from well-meaning bills. This regulation will be challenged, and Colorado cannot afford the lawsuits that are coming to defend our God-given rights outlined in the U.S. Constitution. Please vote no on 1133. Today's solution is tomorrow's problem.
Representative Taggart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you.
I would ask you, members, to turn to page 6 in the bill, the engrossed version. Starting from line 3 and carrying over to page 7, ending on line 15. As a businessman, there are elements in this section that are not doable by our carriers. The systems are not in place, and I'll give you some examples of that. And when we have a safety clause on a bill and the systems and procedures are not in place, this is a reason to go back to the Business Committee. For instance, we as brands and manufacturers do not have a system set up to, in fact, send a written notice to our carriers about a particular product. We don't have that capability today. That system, and I can't mention the names, but I can, I think, mention one, the U.S. Postal Service, and then there are 2 other very large firms that are carriers that are within this that don't have that system in place. Likewise, those very same carriers, when you get down to line 21, they don't have a system in place to verify that somebody is 21 years of age, and they certainly don't have something in place from the standpoint of getting a photograph and verification of that documentation. So we are in effect with this bill, from a business standpoint, using a safety clause, asking our businesses and our carriers to do something that they presently cannot do. So what's going to happen? They're going to refuse to do this because they're not going to take on that liability. Even though there's a phrase in here that says, if in fact the original vendor of the ammunition does not give written notice, they're off the hook. It's kind of a strange approach to things in my humble estimation. I bring this to your attention that we've got to be careful when we craft bills that they have to be able to be implemented. And I realize there are not a great number of folks in these halls that have very, very in-depth business backgrounds, but I do. This is not doable. From page 6 on to page 7. And until we have verification from these major carriers, this does need to go back to business because it's not doable. And it's especially not doable when we enforce a safety clause. Thank you.
Representative Barone.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, everybody. Up here again on this bill, just as Friday, to speak on various factors of this bill, various factors that will affect Constitution, businesses, and the freedoms that a lot of people here in this country enjoy, especially this state. You've heard this morning and Friday of all these factors and in detail. They have a lot to do with the people that we're representing. The whole state cannot be held to the same standard as different areas of the state. I mean, we have mountain communities, suburbs, rural, plains. We even have a desert. I mean, you can't put everything into a whole statewide regulation, especially this one. And I know it's been said over and over again about constitutionality of this bill. But you also have to take into factor the businesses. These businesses will be pushed out of this state. That's less tax revenue to the state. That's less options to people to shop in the state, which also includes sales tax. And then you got the factor of the right for you to protect yourself. Just like a lot of my colleagues here today said, and this Friday said, 18 to 20-year-olds are not going to be able to buy ammunition to protect themselves, their families. They might be living by themselves in an apartment and maybe their first home, which is unlikely nowadays. But it could be. They could have inherited a home to live in, but they can't buy ammo to protect their homes. That's a big problem. That is a big problem to have. And a lot of people see this. I would really like to hear how many of your constituents would actually agree with this. I know exactly my constituents wouldn't, and I'm rural. I got some suburbs. I got Brighton. I got a little bit of Greeley, the south side and east side of Greeley, but most of the people in my constituency, which is approximately 88,000, I know we all have about the same amount, would not want this to go through. This really brings a bad stain onto this state if we keep pushing this kind of legislation. It's going to bring the federal government to be able to come to the state and really challenge it. And yes, we've heard it over and over again. It will be challenged. We already are in deficit, almost $1 billion. I'm pretty sure Representative Taggart might say it might be a little bit more, but we're going to put ourselves in more of a deficit to be able to defend ourselves from the challenges that are coming, not just from within the state, within the industry, but from the federal government itself. We can't afford to do this. It's going to be challenged. Everybody knows it. And to ignore that is not caring what the state expenditures are going to. We can't afford to do this. I humbly ask for a no vote on this bill. We try to bring it back into business to try to figure it out in committee, but we have to stop it right here. We cannot afford to do this. It's going to be challenged. It's going to cost us money. It's going to cost the taxpayer money. Money that we can use for our roads, money that we can use for our education, our infrastructure, our public safety. That's money that we could use. That's going to go to defend something that is clearly going to be challenged and unconstitutional. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Brooks, this is your second and final time to speak to the bill. You have 8 minutes and 49 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm doing something that I believe that you'll probably see me do very rarely, and that is to come up with a computer. Typically, I speak just straight from the heart. I don't have a lot of notes. But there was an article that I ran in my newsletter that I feel captures a point, and particularly the eloquence of the point, that may escape me if I'm just reading from memory. So I get it. I'm sure that the assumption is, here come the Republicans are stacking up. They're just going to eat up a bunch of time. I get it. I do believe that what I'm about to go over with you is a very pertinent point. It shows specific irony and difficulty, in my opinion, of this bill. No, without further ado, please. As a staunch defender of God-given and constitutional rights and a representative of the people, I find it deeply troubling, not just because 1133 is challenging God-given and unconstitutional rights, but because a bipartisan amendment, if you remember, that happened right here, was added to the bill that exposes a fundamental truth that simply cannot be ignored. In a rare bipartisan effort, and I applaud both sides for doing so, Majority Leader and Minority Leader came up here together and they ran Amendment 037. It's a good amendment on the surface. This amendment carves out an exemption for individuals under the age of 21 who are identified as protected persons in a protection order. Now you say, really, you're going to argue against that? No, not particularly, but I think it's the irony of this that's important and what I would like you to hear me out on. So in other words, if a young person, if a young adult has a protection order against somebody who may do them harm, they are now the exceptions that would be allowed to purchase ammunition for the purposes of self-defense. This amendment, while intended as a compromise, and one that I do recognize the bipartisan spirit of, actually highlights the very principle the Second Amendment was written to uphold, the right to self-defense. If we, all of us in this room, as lawmakers can recognize that a person under the age of 21 years of age has the right to defend themselves when facing a credible threat, then why are we stripping that exact same right away from every other law-abiding young adult? The logic here is truly inescapable. The authors of 1133, by agreeing to this amendment, are tacitly admitting that self-defense with a firearm is a legitimate and necessary right. Think about it. That amendment legitimizes the need to defend one's self from both sides of the aisle. If this right is valid for somebody under a protection order, it is just as valid for any young adult who wishes to exercise their right to self-defense. It's not just an amendment that infringes upon God-given rights, it's bad policy. There is no evidence, remember I talked about this, that I asked at the very beginning of the committee. I said I really would like data. Please show me the data. The data was never shown because data does not exist. There's no evidence that restricting ammunition sales to adults age 18 to 20 reduces crime in any manner whatsoever. In fact, the data shows that violent crime has risen in Colorado since stricter gun control measures were implemented over the past decade. Criminals, by definition, will not follow the law. They will not be deterred by this bill. The only people impacted are law-abiding citizens who wish to exercise their constitutional rights. The Second Amendment was never about just simply sport hunting or shooting. It's also about ensuring that individuals can protect themselves, their families, and their freedoms. 1133 infringes upon that right, if not outright tramples upon it. While this final amendment offered by the Democrats and agreed upon by minority party as well, proves why the right exists in the first place. If self-defense is a valid reason for one group to retain access to ammunition, it is a valid reason for all law-abiding citizens. Let's please not allow emotion and posturing to erode away the rights that protect all of us. I urge my colleagues and constituents to see this bill for what it truly is, an infringement upon rights and an ineffective solution to the challenges that we face. Let's draft legislation around those. We need to focus on holding criminals accountable, not disarming responsible citizens and stifling their God-given right to self-defense. As I imagine you probably guessed by now, I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm here today to point out what we did last Friday, as all my colleagues before me have done. This is an inalienable right that is be taken away from Colorado. Notice as I said, it's an inalienable right and not a constitutional right, because this is a fundamental right that government cannot and should not even try to take away. This includes the right to life. When you can defend yourself, when you can defend your property and your family, you're defending life. Liberty. Liberty rights are freedoms and permissions that protect people from government overreach, which this bill, if passed, will do, and the pursuit of happiness, to have small business operations, to pursue options that allow them to feed and prosper for their families and their communities. This bill is a slap to the face in Coloradans. They voted us here to do the work that they are too busy in their lives, when they are defending their families, when they're providing for their families with businesses, and when they're running their businesses, that are so busy doing what they do best, that we are the voice for them. We should be making sure we are the voice for all of Colorado. We need to make sure that we are not only not taking 18, 19, and 20-year-olds' rights to protect themselves, but we're also allowing businesses to flourish. We heard many arguments on Friday, and it hurt my heart to have to go back to my community this weekend, to the community roundtables, because I like to face my constituents face on and let them know what's happening. The good, the bad, the ugly. Unfortunately, it's been bad and ugly. I had a look in the face of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who looked at me and said, what happens if a coyote or a wolf or another predatory animal comes for our livestock? How are we supposed to fuel our tools to protect us? We won't be able to have ammo. How are we supposed to protect our equipment and our family? I had older siblings, upwards of 20s and 30s, say, how is my younger sister or my younger brother supposed to live on their own when they have a disability? And they were so excited to have this option, but now they won't feel safe if this bill is passed to live on their own. I had to look at business owners who are already so burdened by Colorado because we are an anti-business state the way this legislators are going. We are so anti-business from this body that we are hurting small businesses. We are making it less affordable to live in Colorado. And I had to look at my small business mom and pop shops and say, business will be going to Nebraska, Kansas, Wyoming, if and when this bill is passed. I had to look them in the face and tell them what this body had done Friday, what this body continues to do, as we are striking away not just at their rights, but their businesses. And let us address mental health. We have a mental health crisis here in the state, and this bill will only increase that. How do you tell somebody they can't prosper? They don't have life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness because this bill is going to go through? How do you tell somebody that they are no longer safe or have the dignity to protect themselves because they don't have the tool that's fully functioning because they don't have ammo to put in it? 18, 19, 20-year-olds already struggling with affordability, with not being heard, and now we're going to add mental health crisis because they don't have the dignity to protect themselves, their properties, especially in rural Colorado. We had options to protect. Now this bill, if it would just go away, would protect completely. But we heard this body as a majority vote against those who are disabled, vote against women, vote against small business owners, vote against mental health. The list goes on and on. And the disrespectful thing is it doesn't seem, at least from my point of view, that this fixes anything. Now, I can't say what the motives are for behind this bill. I don't want to impugn motive. But I can tell you that my district is upset. They are scared. They are hurting. And this bill will just add to that. I strongly urge a no vote, not just for our inalienable rights that our Constitution protects, but also our small businesses, for mental health, for those who want to be able to protect, defend, prosper in Colorado, instead of being forced to go to other states to do just that.
Representative Bradley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had someone say to me that I'm speaking from a script, and I want to assure you this is definitely not a script. The Republican caucus, this affects us. It affects our constituents. We're speaking from the heart. And every time I go into a committee, when someone presents a bill, I think any lobbyist or Democrat will tell you I listen intently. I take note after note after note because I want to understand the bill that's being brought forward. I never tell anyone how I'm going to vote on a bill until after I've heard every single part of it. So this is not a scripted dialogue. This is from the heart, and this is impacting the constituents in HD 39. I've gotten so many emails because people are scared. I think people are scared of what's happening at the federal level, but what's happening at the state level is super scary for the constituents in my district. We have made Colorado the 6th most regulated state, and businesses are closing at an unprecedented rate. In the second quarter of 2023, 12,000, businesses dissolved in Colorado. And the 12-month total of dissolution filings was up 12% from the previous year. 6th most regulated state. Denver's restaurants have decreased 22% since 2021, and it's so bad, and people are not listening to these business owners, that they had to write a letter to the mayor saying that they are now watching downtown fall apart. And this body has created an almost lawlessness. We have waitresses, hostesses, other young people ages 18 to 20 working late at night who will not now have the right to purchase ammo to protect themselves in a state that we have created to be ridden with crime. I have heard it many times. Criminals will still find ammo, and this bill does nothing to curb that crime. Instead, it comes after law-abiding citizens who have been given the constitutional right to defend themselves without restriction. I told you guys this the other day. We have been designated the 3rd least safe state in the country. 47 other states are safer than ours. We are the 8th most violent state, and we are the 4th highest in rape. Yet we continue to pass and regulate Second Amendment rights over and over every single year. And I pulled those bills. House Bill 1349, an excess tax on firearm ammunition sales, which is kind of funny because now we're eliminating sales of ammo to 18 to 20-year-olds. So we have House Bill 1353. We have Senate Bill 24066. We have Senate Bill 169. We have House Bill 1008. We have House Bill 1219. We have House Bill 1353, House Bill 1348, House Bill 1008. These are bills affecting the firearm industry, regulations on businesses, economic effects that will cripple businesses. And we just continue to go. And for what? And that's why I come down here. What do all these bills do to help crime in our state? Because we continue to increase. I mean, where do we go from here? I guess we could be the worst state as far as crime. I guess instead of being the 8th most violent state, we could be the 6th most violent state. Maybe instead of being 4th highest in rape, we could be 1st highest in rape. I mean, we're not far off. So all of these bills, I mean, we've got 3 pages of bills that this body continues to legislate on law-abiding citizens that continue to escalate crime. And at some point, you have to ask yourselves, if we don't put criminals in jail and we keep going after law-abiding citizens, these rates will continue to increase. You're not going after the people committing the crimes. You're going after me and my husband and my children and the people in my district that want to be able to defend themselves and their property. Because if you weren't going after us and you were putting criminals in jail, we would become a safe state. But that doesn't seem to be the motive. And for women who continue to be victims of crimes, this is unfair, and I'm sorry. It is unfair for us as a body to legislate onto 18 to 20-year-olds their ability to protect themselves while not locking up violent offenders. I have a bill coming to protect children. we're not protecting the victims in this state. We have to look at this at some point. We have to come back to the table and say over 20 bills and our crime rate continues to rise. I mean, do we just lock up the guns from law-abiding citizens and just watch complete lawlessness? I don't know. For women, we have heard a gun is the greatest equalizer. I own many guns. I feel very protected. We hear story after story of people coming and saying that guns killed them and things like that, and I have empathy for those people, but we also hear stories of women who defended themselves against rape, against an armed robbery, were able to defend their families against an attacker. So you don't get to play one story off the other. Guns help us defend ourselves. We've heard stories that simply brandishing a gun stops almost 500,000 to 3 million crimes a year. So I'll tell you that more guns don't mean more violence. I would argue that more guns mean less violence. If we stop 3 million crimes a year just by pulling out a gun, that should say a lot to diminish the statistics from the other side. And let's talk about crimes involving female victims. And this is not diminishing the men that deserve to be able to defend themselves or the disabled community. But as a woman, I feel like I should come up here and talk to the other women in the caucuses. Statistics on crimes involving female victims ages 18 to 21 can vary depending on the source. Uniform Crime Reporting Program managed by the FBI. This program collects data on crimes reported to law enforcement agencies across the country. National Crime Victimization Survey conducted by the BJS. This survey collects data on personal and household victimization through interviews with a nationally representative sample. General trends. Violent crime. Women aged 18 to 21 are often at higher risk for certain types of violent crime, including sexual assault and intimate partner violence. Sexual assault. This age group is particularly vulnerable to sexual violence. According to various studies and reports, young women in this age range experience higher rates of sexual assault compared to older age groups. Intimate partner violence. Women aged 18 to 24 generally experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence, which includes physical violence, sexual violence, and stalking by a current or former intimate partner. Specific statistics. While specific statistics for the exact age range of 18 to 21 can be challenging to isolate, here are some general findings. Sexual assault, according to the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, young women aged 18 to 24 experience the highest rates of rape and sexual assault. And again, we are the 4th highest state for rape. And now we are going to take the people that are the most criminalized and continue to tie their hands behind their backs. Intimate partner violence, the NCVS and other studies have found that women, particularly those aged 18 to 24, are at a higher risk of experiencing intimate partner violence compared to other women. So why do we continue to push bills that will create more victims? I ask myself that every day I come into this building. When will we aim bills at protecting victims and keep Coloradans safe? Let's get back to public safety. And I asked my husband, who's been a gun owner probably since he was...
Representative Bradley, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you so much for that. What is the qualitative difference of those in the armed forces between the ages of 18 to 20 and my 4 boys who have grown up respecting and shooting guns and hunting? So because my kids might not choose to join the armed forces, they don't get to defend themselves. Criminals will get guns and ammo, no matter how many hundreds of gun regulating bills we pass, and they will always have the upper hand, especially against my kids. Gun rights are women's rights. Gun rights are human rights, and we have the right to defend ourselves and property without government infringement, and we will continue to fight, especially in my district, against these unconstitutional bills. Vote no on this horrible legislation. Thank you.
Representative Hartsook.
Good
morning. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Good morning.
Since the dawn of time, we've had tools and weapons. Throughout history, they've been used for defense, offense, food, gathering, survival. They are a tool. In today's modern age, ammunition is a part of that tool. It's a component to multiple things that go hunting, sport shooting, self-defense, armed forces, all over the place. Tools are moved around. Tools can do a variety of things. You can do good things, you can do bad things. You can build a house properly with a hammer, or you can build it horribly. That's not the fault of the tool, that's the fault of the person that is wielding it. Throughout Colorado here, we have numerous 4-H clubs around the state. Most of those clubs have shooting groups that are within them. My son used to participate in some of them, and I have lots of friends that had their kids throughout junior high and high school that were in the 4-H shooting clubs. That included rifles, shotguns. My son, when he was in his early teens, was on the shooting team with the Boy Scouts. Would spend lots of time shooting. Businesses in this state provide those products, provide those tools. We go there, we get them the tools that they need so they can go out and do the sport shooting, whether it's in 4-H or Boy Scouts or any other shooting club that they are in. Going hunting after they go through hunter safety and they get their license. We allow teenagers to drive, get a license at 16. We allow them to vote at 18. Join the military. We can join the military under 18. Parental consent. You can sign up on your own at 18. You can go to war at 18. And you can carry things a lot bigger than just ammunition. So we entrust kids, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 14-year-olds, to go shooting in clubs, 4-H clubs, military. We trust them in the defense of our nation to go overseas and fight in a war if that's what's needed. But we're going to have a piece of legislation that says they can't buy ammunition. We have a piece of legislation that says, gives them pause to stop and go, you're not qualified to buy ammunition. Legislation says you need to be 21. But we can send them to war. They can join law enforcement. They can be in shooting clubs. But they can't buy ammunition. Now let's talk about the businesses. What does that do to businesses? This state, Colorado, is part of the Western frontier. There's hunting, there's ranches all over the place. There are threats. When you're out in the middle of nowhere, you need to be able to defend yourself against a variety of threats. Not always a human threat, but sometimes animal threats. Whether they're mountain lions, bears. I can tell you for a fact the house that we had down there in Colorado Springs, when I was stationed there, came home one day and there was a big old black bear sitting on our porch. There was a mountain lion that killed a deer in our backyard. Our kids were little. We made sure they were never outside without us, and I kept my rifle handy. In many of the parts of the state, Western Slopes, Eastern Plains, teenagers are at home sometimes. We're out working in the field. Wasn't that long ago that everyone carried a rifle with them. Where my wife is from up in Michigan, everyone would carry a rifle when it was deer season going into school. Usually they were skipping the first day of school. They'd go out for deer season. But now we're going to say they can't buy ammunition. The impact to businesses is going to be significant. I would certainly say that it's a fair assumption that there will be businesses that will look at this law and go, I can't do business. And they'll either close that phase of what they're doing, or if that's what they do predominantly, they might close lock, stock, and barrel and close their doors. And so what does that do to a community? It provides input at a community. It provides money to a community. It sponsors different things that are happening in that community. It sponsors the schools. It sponsors sports teams. But we're going to take away those small businesses because they can no longer afford to do business. Whether it be regulatory, that they can't do it, they can't comply, they don't have the space, they don't have the money, the overhead to do it. So those businesses will likely close their doors and go out of business. So the state then loses a tax base, the community loses a supporter, and people who have had that business lose their way of life. Where I come from, that's not fair. That's not right. That's not just. We don't take away from somebody just because we don't like something. We should not legislate from fear or from hatred of a tool. Ammunition is merely a tool. It's part of a system. It goes together with the weapons that can be used for hunting, sport shooting, 4-H clubs, all kinds of things, not to get into the whole self-defense realm. But there's thousands of things that we do in this society that involves ammunition. We do testing. People that sometimes go into forensics with law enforcement study the ballistics of what certain rounds do. They do that by shooting them over and over. And usually they get an interest in them at a young age. They study, how does that ballistics work? When you do competition shooting, you usually start young, the different types of ammunition, the different weights of how you want to shoot. Last week when I was up here talking, I go into the gun store and I will compare the ballistics and the price of ammunition to see will it achieve what I need it to do, whether it's hunting, going out on the range, whether I'm shooting at 200 yards, 400 yards. I used to shoot further, but my eyesight's not as good anymore, so I don't hit the 600, 800-yard targets anymore. But I used to pick out the ammunition to do that. And I need to be able to compare and see what I'm looking at. My kids were always interested in doing that with me, too. They're always like, Dad, how can you hit that target that far away? Lots of practice. And practice comes with buying lots of ammunition and shooting it. This is going to negatively impact our communities, our businesses. It will drive many of them out of business. That will have multiple second, third order effects on that support that goes in that community. There are multiple ramifications to this. And last but not least, this body has passed countless bills, pieces of legislation against gun industry, ammunition industry, possession, types, you name it. And it doesn't address the violence that's out there because the weapon doesn't do anything. It is the individual that has stolen it, own it, wants to do something bad with it. No different than the person that deliberately goes flying down the freeway racing at 80, 100 miles an hour. We need to stop criminalizing people that are doing the right things, enforce the laws that we have,
Rep.
and stop
Hartsook,
adding
you have
to
1
them.
minute remaining.
Thank you so much. I urge a no vote.
Representative Weinberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Good morning, General Assembly 75. Today is a sad day for this chamber. I know how the votes are going to go. I know that some of what we are saying will go on deaf ears. But I feel the need to come down and say it one more time. I hammered this bill in seconds. I gave my reasoning for unconstitutionality of it. I'm not going to drone on and on and on, and I'll stick to the main topics. This is an absolute misuse of the safety clause. We should petition this, and you, as responsible legislators, would kick it back to the people to give them an opportunity to put it on a ballot. My second point, all the gun shops in my city will effectively be put out of business. All at a point that will not solve a thing. This will not stop criminals, and this will not make this state safer. The city of Loveland, 88,000 strong, is in the well, and we say no.
Representative Sukla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I didn't think this thing could go any lower, but I thought the lowest it went was with Representative Byrd. I tell you what, I'm here today to talk about the young people that this bill affects. At 18, Americans can serve in the military, vote, sign contracts, yet the bill suggests they are not responsible enough to purchase ammo. This could be seen as an arbitrary restriction that unfairly limits the rights of legal adults. If ammunition is harder to access legally, some individuals might resort to reloading their own ammo, potentially leading to safety risks due to improper handling of gunpowder and primers. If the justification is that we're not mature enough, why is this logic not applied to voting, military service, or legal contracts? The law unfairly picks and chooses which rights young adults can exercise instead of treating them as full citizens. This bill disarms young adults while still holding them accountable as full-fledged citizens. If they are trusted to vote and serve in the military and pay taxes, they should also be trusted to exercise their Second Amendment rights. HB 25-1133 hits rural America the hardest by making ammo harder to buy, limit self-defense options, disrupting hunting and farming, and harming small businesses. It creates unnecessary barriers for law-abiding citizens while doing little to prevent crime. Now I want to talk about women. It disarms young women at an age when they are gaining independence and may need to protect themselves from crime, abuse, or dangerous situations. It creates unnecessary barriers for law-abiding women while doing nothing to stop the criminals. Now I want to talk about the tribes. I have the Ute Mountains, Southern Ute, and the Ute Mountain tribes where I live. They are a sovereign nation. They are allowed to hunt on all of the Forest Service lands, the San Juan Forest, which is 1.2 million acres. And as soon as they step off of that reservation, they are going to be illegal. The Native Americans that were here first. And now I want to tell a story about what happened to me. Up there in the mountains, I have a ranch at 10,000 feet elevation. And what we do is there's a lot of mice up there. And so we have cats. We call them snowbird cats. We take them up in the mountains in the summertime. We leave them up there in the side room in the cabin, and they stay there all summer, and you don't have any mice. But what you do is you take cat food, and you give them cat food. Well, I made a mistake, and I took the cat food, and I stuck it on the outside wall. And so one night, I'm staying the night in my cabin, and which my daughter stays, and her friends stay in that cabin a lot of times. And I hear a roof, roof noise. And what had happened was a bear had dug, it's a dirt floor on the side room of the cabin, and a bear had dug underneath the wall of the cabin and got in that side room because they have a very good sense of smell, and it smelt that cat food. And it got in there, and it was eating that cat food. And so there's no windows going outside the front door of that cabin. There's one way in and one way out except for that side room. And once a bear breaks into your cabin one time, they never quit. They just keep coming and they keep coming. And so it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting there in my underwear. I got a gun, and I'm scared to death. But I got to walk out that door with a flashlight, holding it at the same time with that gun. And I got to protect myself and my cabin because I know that they're not going to stop. I opened up that door, afraid to death, ran out in the middle of the road, and I waited where the hole was, where I seen the hole. As soon as I seen that hole, I watched it for a while, and pretty soon I yelled, the bear stuck its head through the hole, and then it jumped out of the side of my cabin, and it was 10 feet away, and I shot, and I missed it by a mile. And then it took off running, and then it started running back towards me, and then I shot again, and I killed it. That situation right there could be an 18-year-old adult. That happens all the time in rural Colorado. And what this bill is doing is unfairly treating rural Colorado the same as it does over here in the urban area. It's unfair. It's not right. We have different situations. We live differently, and we need to think accordingly when we pass these kind of bills that hurts our young adults, young adults. So this hits me hard. It makes me sick to my stomach, and I wished that we could have some reasoning in this room right here to do the right thing. Thank you.
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in opposition to this bill and was just sitting here listening to the debate and reasons listed, and certainly am very much compelled on the age side of things. You know, as we think about what can a person between 18 and 21 do in our great state, I mean, they can contract, they can get married, they can join the military, they can die for their country, they can save a life, they can consent to an assault, otherwise known as surgery, they can get a tattoo, they can, the list goes on and on, contract, sue and be sued, form a business. They can even own a firearm, and to say that they can't purchase unless they fall under one of the exceptions that was listed in an amendment that was added earlier in the process is quite troubling. The bill kind of presumes that someone might have a license to hunt in our state or a hunter's safety card from our state. But what happens if there's an equivalent from another state? The bill doesn't take into consideration that someone might move to Colorado from another state or be visiting in Colorado. I mean, certainly there's the possibility of friends or relatives from another state that would come here. And if those adults who are over 18 who are wanting to go hunting and needing to stop by and buy ammunition, certainly if they are able to, they should be allowed to. I was also reading the part that talks about the shipping. And there's an area that I worry impacts federal law. So as some of you know, I enjoy shooting black powder. And under the definition of ammunition, it talks about it being defined as, and we'll just go back to the definition itself on page 2. Ammunition means ammunition or cartridge, case, primer, bullet, or propellant powder designed for use in a firearm. The term ammunition does not include a shotgun, shot, or pellet not designed for use as the single complete projectile load for one single shot hull or casing, or an unloaded non-metallic shotgun hull or casing that does not have a primer. The definition here, I feel like, just presumes shotgun. It does not necessarily presume what you would have for black powder with a lead ball, particularly if you have the black powder charge behind that ball. I purchased mine from Italy. They do come, but federal law does require that the shipper has to disclose within the shipping forms in the package that it does contain lead ammunition. So in this particular case, under both federal and even Italian law, they would be required to disclose the contents of that package. But then under this particular bill, it's saying that it cannot be disclosed. So because of that, I feel like we have an Equal Protection Clause violation that's occurring here. Certainly that can be quite troubling when you have to comply with international law, federal law, and then have a state law that is even more restrictive of that. And that's something that I fear could certainly have a troubling impact across Colorado. For those reasons, I will be a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Kelty, you have 7 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. This is your second time to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I feel like we've talked Constitution and talked about that. I don't feel that's actually being cared about, in my opinion. And we talked about domestic violence victims 18 to 20, and I don't believe that's even, I believe that's being ignored, in my opinion, with this bill. I want to tell you what happened on Friday when I was driving into work, or here. Driving down Logan Street, there was a coyote. And I thought, a coyote in Denver? Oh my gosh. And sure enough, I've got plenty of them around my house. I've got bobcats, I've got mountain lions, I've got bear, I've got everything. But a coyote on the streets of Denver really shocked me. So I followed the coyote to warn people who are out, young people who are out before they either go to school or go to work, that there was a coyote in the area because they were out walking their dogs, their little permit-sized little coyote snackable dogs. And it really got me thinking about my district, where we have a lot of hikers, a lot of nature enthusiasts, and lots of them are between 18 and 20. Again, in my area, I have mountain lions, I have bobcats, I have coyote, we've got everything that you can think of that could eat their snack-sized little apartment-sized dogs. Not just that, but also my 18 to 20-year-old kids, as you guys want them to believe. I believe that they are young adults that will be out there. And how are they going to protect themselves out in the middle of the woods? How are they going to protect themselves and their dog, or maybe even their small child? My son was married at 20 years old. How are they going to protect them out in the middle of the woods while they're enjoying themselves? They're supposed to enjoy the nature. Because nature is still nature, and nature will do what nature does. This bill prevents not just domestic violence victims from protecting themselves. It doesn't just go against the Constitution. It doesn't just infringe the rights of every single American in the state of Colorado. But it puts these people who really want to enjoy and love the state of Colorado for exactly what it is, at least in my area, very, very, very natural. It prevents them from being safe from that environment. I'm asking one last time for a no vote on this bill, because you're not thinking of everyone. You're only thinking of the people here in Denver. And honestly, that's a shame, because I want to keep my people safe in my district. This bill does not do that.
Representative Bottoms.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have two sides of the aisle here that do two similar things, but in two different contexts. On our side of the aisle, we know that we cannot get certain bills through because we don't have the number of votes.
And so we do what's called messaging bills. We run a bill that tries to speak something and illuminate what the other side of the aisle thinks by how they vote. But we know we can't get the bill passed. This is interesting because this type of bill does both. It's going to be passed because we can't stop it, but it's also a messaging bill. We had a bill in committee last night, did the same thing. It basically
Representative
says
Bottoms to the bill before us. Thank you.
that basically says that we do not agree with the Second Amendment. We do not agree with the mentality of the Second Amendment, and we're going to do this through ammunition. We're going to do this through through gun infringements or whatever. The Second Amendment still says no infringement. This is an infringement. When you're talking about ammunition, it's still an infringement. It's part of the big picture. And so this is what happens. It's a messaging bill and it's going to get voted in bill. I think part of the responsibility of everybody in this room is to make sure that your message gets outside these walls. This is a very small space that a lot of people don't know what's happening outside these walls. And so we have these kind of things that say, this is how I feel about ammunition, this is how I feel about guns and all this kind of stuff. And so in that respect, now this is an unconstitutional bill. We already know that the players that are going to be suing over this, the moment, if it gets signed, the moment it gets signed, we already know who's going to sue over this, which is really not good for the bottom line of the state because this is going to cost the state millions of dollars. This is not going to stop at some lower level court. This is going to go all the way up. And we have to get it past the Colorado Supreme Court because of who they are. And so we have to get it to the SCOTUS. And so that's what's going to happen. And so that's going to cost millions of dollars to the state when we don't have millions of dollars to spend on this. But here's where it works out, I think, for me. And this is one of those, and I'm going to remind us throughout the entire session this year and next year, when these things are these kind of messaging things. Thank you for this because this does let everybody know the two differences in the sides of the aisle. Why we say this is a bad bill, Second Amendment infringement. Why the other side would say whatever, and we're gonna take those votes and make sure that's known. So this is a good one for me personally because here's the demographic that you might want to know. Right now, the number one group of people in the United States that are now buying guns, ammunition, obviously you don't buy a gun without ammunition, that are buying guns and ammunition, the number one block of people in the United States that are becoming pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment is females 18 to 25. So thank you for allowing me to be able to verbalize that in this room and outside this room. It's going to give me a lot of mileage. Thank you very much.
Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All right, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in favor of our founding, of our Constitution, our glorious founding. Frederick Douglass referred to our Constitution. He referred to it as a glorious liberty document. He said, I defy the presentation of a single pro-slavery clause in it. In fact, Douglass told a crowd gathered to hear his Independence Day address, interpreted it ought to be, as it ought to be interpreted, the Constitution is a glorious liberty document. And what this does, what this bill does, is it undermines the foundation. Now, undermining is to mine under, to dig under for the purpose of collapse. It's really an act of war. That's what this bill does. The purpose of a bill like this is to collapse the foundation, the collapse of that glorious liberty document, to get at all the other amendments. So yes, we are fighting here in favor of the Second Amendment, but we're also here for the First Amendment. The safety clause would be one, the Fifth Amendment, the Second Amendment, of course, and then even the Fifth and 14th, probably the Sixth. Because we're talking about depriving citizens of their liberty, of their pursuit of happiness by taking their livelihood away. Now, my colleague asked earlier, said, what is this endless parade of Second Amendment infringements? how has that been good for crime? And I'd say it's been very good for crime. Crime is a growth industry in Colorado. Number 3 most dangerous state, number 1 in bank robberies, number 1 in car theft, number 4 in property crime, number 4 in rape, number high in violent crime. Number 10, in the car theft, that also leads to the number 6 in the for car insurance. Of course, that goes to the climate goals of people not being able to afford personal vehicles. Number 8 in violent crime. Number 10 in the rate of human trafficking. And the list goes on. It's a collusion between the criminals, common and elected, to make crime a growth industry in Colorado. Because if the outcome is obvious, the intent can be inferred. Now, that doesn't speak to motive. I don't know why anybody would want crime to go up in Colorado, but crime is going up in Colorado commensurate with the restrictive gun laws. Businesses are leaving Colorado in relation to the number of other laws and the number of infringements on businesses. So today, with a bill coming before us like this, I think the eagle's head is hanging pretty low. That a body of individuals sworn to uphold the Constitution of Colorado and the United States would so willingly and flagrantly bring a bill and support a bill undermining the Constitution of the United States. So Frederick Douglass, he referred to it as that glorious liberty document. He said a man's rights rest in 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. Please use them in that order. This is an assault on the cartridge box. This is an assault on liberty. Under the good intentions of being something about crime and reducing crime. But we have already shown that all of your efforts to reduce crime have increased crime, have made it a growth industry. So just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, the use of the tool is in the hand of the holder, and this is a tool. And this does not have, and this tool, the firearm, is nothing without the fire. Because the reason that we have the cartridge box, as noted by Frederick Douglass, is because we have that Fifth Amendment, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, which are preserving those creator-endowed self-evident rights, whereby the government is purposed with securing the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter and abolish it and form a government that does support the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This bill is just more proof that there is no problem that the government can't make worse with a solution. You present a solution to decrease crime, you increase crime. Because you want to squeeze the human into some sort of totalitarian mold and make him into your own image. 1133 is a de facto gun registration. And who would you be registering with? Well, in order to buy ammunition, you present some form of ID. I suppose you could present some, you could present a utility bill, perhaps. Any utility bill, because a utility bill is all you need to vote in Colorado, so a utility bill should be all that you need to present as an ID to purchase ammunition. Since the vote is certainly more important than buying of ammunition. So now, when this body says sometimes it actually says it's racist to ask for an ID, now this body is going to say you have to have an ID to buy ammunition, which would make that requirement racist, so now this bill is racist. So the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is an infringement. And by being an infringement, it is a violation of our Constitution. That automatically makes this law void. Now, of course, it's going to have to go through the legal process, and it's going to cost millions of dollars, but it still has to go. This bill deprives the right of self-defense to defend your life, liberty, and property against those who would deprive it without due process of law, whether those criminals are common or elected. We already talked about how this bill violates the First Amendment as well as undermines the Second and all the rest by putting a safety clause on it to tell the people of Colorado that you cannot petition your government for redress of grievances. So there's just so many violations of our founding document wrapped up in this paper. And supported by people who take an oath to support and defend the Constitution. I guess you don't, this body doesn't take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, but support the Constitution. That'd be the military members. So when military members sign up to undermine the Constitution as part of their oath to support and defend the Constitution, I'm really kind of wondering if they've ever read the Constitution. Businesses are being deprived of their livelihood, their pursuit of happiness. They're deprived without a trial. This bill undermines the very essence of our foundational liberty. And this is at a time when our governor is filling the state with predators. This makes the Second Amendment ever more important. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of our Constitution, of that glorious liberty document, and question why anybody would want to undermine it. That indeed makes the head of the eagle hang very, very low. Because it's applicable, I'll reiterate that any unarmed people are slaves, are subject to slavery at any given moment. If the guns are taken out of the hands of the people and only the pigs have guns, then it's off to the concentration camps. And we've seen this. History is a warning from the future, and we have seen this over and over. 100 to 200 million people have been killed by their governments, legally, because the government first took their firearms. The gas chambers, or whatever the fascists in America come up with, one of the democratic rights of the United States, the Second Amendment to the Constitution, gives the people right.
Representative DeGraff, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Gives the people the right to bear arms. However, there is a greater right, the right of the human dignity that gives all men the right to defend themselves. So I'm asking you, honor your oath. I'm asking you to honor your oath to support the Constitution, to not undermine our glorious liberty document for political grandstanding. And if you don't like the term fascist, don't do fascist stuff. Thank you.
Representative Woog.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I couldn't agree more with my colleague from El Paso County. We all did swear an oath. We are here to uphold this Constitution. We have been coming down here and calling out parts of the Constitution that this bill just simply doesn't work with. And there has been no debate, and that's a huge disservice in my mind to all of our constituents. I would love to hear from anyone who disagrees with us. I would love to hear from anyone on why we are wrong, why this does not meet our Constitution. So please come down. Let's make this good for everyone, the people listening. This is a healthy debate, and we've brought up very valid points, and I have not heard anything to the contrary. So I urge a no vote on House Bill 1133.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To start out this debate, the bill sponsors pointed to the fact that bullets are the leading cause of death of youth. And in order to figure out, where that came from, I did a search. And in order to keep from being accused of picking only those sources that I would like or that would, reinforce my own bias, I just used what the AI generator on my search engine came up with. It's interesting because that statement actually varies depending on the age. So that is a true statement if the age range of youth is 1 to 19. It is actually not a true statement if the age range is 0 to 19, 1 to 17, or especially if we start at conception and go further. The leading cause of death of 18-year-olds, again, according to just a general AI-generated response, is defined as unintentional injuries, vehicle crashes, drowning, suffocation. That constitutes 37.4% of 18-year-old deaths. Homicide follows at 21.8%, and suicide at 17%. For females ages 13 to 19, the number one cause of death is motor vehicle crashes. When you look at the top 3 means by which people in this age range commit suicide, you're looking at firearms, hanging and suffocation, and poisoning. And all 3 of those for women are basically equal, around 30%. And so I look at this bill and I say, if the reason for this bill, the stated purpose of this bill, is to minimize death amongst minors and youth, does that actually do this? And as prior colleagues have pointed out, I agree, the data doesn't support going to this measure in order to handle this stated statistical problem. You know, it reminds me of a quote that says that a person uses statistics as a drunken man uses lampposts for support rather than illumination. Doesn't actually illuminate the conversation in any real way. Which has kind of been my struggle in this space for the 5 years that I've been in this building. In my first year, there were a number of bills
colleagues here
desire to do able to raise their kids. Thank you.
Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to all of our colleagues today. Thank you to our colleagues here to the right for letting me speak here a little bit. I also want to thank the sponsors for bringing this bill, and I particularly want to thank them for their grace for allowing me to speak today. You know, I wanted to address 2 major things. We have babies coming in today. And I was listening to our colleague from, is it Otero, Penrose, all of the places, for just speaking as well and talking about the lamppost.
Representative Luck, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to all of our colleagues today. Thank you to our colleagues here to the right for letting me speak here a little bit. I also want to thank the sponsors for bringing this bill, and I particularly want to thank them for their grace for allowing me to speak today. You know, I wanted to address 2 major things. We have babies coming in today. And I was listening to our colleague from, is it Otero, Penrose, all of the places, for just speaking as well and talking about the lamppost. I really appreciated that note because there are some things that I just want to put out there, and I came down to speak on behalf of those who will support this bill. And quite frankly, I came down to speak to talk a little bit about the assertions that have been made to maybe offer some other ways to think. So never mind the fact that I sit in judiciary. Our own departments of public safety have come to us and say crime is down. Since I have been here in the legislature, we have created over 40 new crimes. We have put $500 million into law enforcement in the last 4 years. And also, Denver is not a war zone on behalf of my district and all of those in Denver. In fact, Denverites have been taking on the brunt and the bearing of being a capital city. Where other places in the state would not provide resources, we do it here, and we all do it without complaining because we care about people from across the state. But to be clear, Denverites have also asked for other solutions to these problems that, quite frankly, do not get the same audience. The other part is, never mind that those who are in law enforcement and in the military are vetted by way of their training on how to use a weapon. Never mind that investing in upstream investments to produce better outcomes for kids are vastly less expensive, so never mind those things. But those are also facts. But what I really want to talk about first, as a little bit of a digression, as a woman, and quite frankly, as a black woman, and I've said this in committee, I am more statistically likely to be a victim of any crime in this state, and yet I do not appreciate being talked about as a permanent weaker class. Stop talking about me as trapped in oppression, that I need a gun, and that I need to be afraid all the time. What I would like to hear is maybe we talk to our sons about not being rapists before you talk to me about being a permanent victim. Maybe we can do that in here, because when we try to bring those bills, when we try to support Prop KK, when we try to do these things, we get no's. And so when we have the opportunity, I ask for that we get all of this kind of debate and that we sit together to figure out how to prevent crime. But when I hear about this is a tool, this is what I want to say. The next time law enforcement or the military asks for more funds, for more guns, I'm going to tell them it's not the tool that kills people, it's people who kill people. Please go to war with a bow and arrow and a rock. And you know what they're going to say to me? They're going to talk about how guns and tanks are more efficient as weapons. There is a reason why we don't fight wars with bows and arrows anymore. We fight them with guns because of how efficient they are at their purpose. And yes, we are talking about the tool because of how efficient it is at its purpose. That is what we're bringing forward today. And if we're going to talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we want to talk about the ability to save our lives. Because when some of us go to a movie theater, when some of us go to church, or when some of us go to a grocery store, we feel like we are at war. Because people walk into those places with efficient machines. They are more efficient than a knife or a machete. And so what we want is a chance to survive. We want our kids to have a chance to survive a suicide attempt. Don't our lives also matter in the pursuit? And the solution is not to turn a grocery store, a movie theater, a church into an OK corral by just arming each other and calling it a fourth leveler. We too want to level the force by bringing it down. That is why we are bringing these bills forward. And so, on behalf of the rest of us, to be clear, we have not banned guns. To be clear, families will still own guns to be able to support what they need to on the plains or farms and so forth. But to be clear, on behalf of those of us who do not live in the rural side, we also have an interest in keeping our kids, our neighbors, and all of us alive when we just want to get groceries or go to a prayer group. So I do believe this is a force leveler, and it is about the tool because of how efficient it is. And if you don't believe that, I don't want to hear about any more spending on weapons for law enforcement and the military. And so at the end of the day, on behalf of this Black woman Denverite, I will not accept that I am a permanent weaker class. I do want to see force leveled out. I don't want us all to start buying guns just to shoot back because we didn't do something otherwise. And I will play a part in talking about domestic violence. And I hope you all support the bills when we want to invest in that. So as of this moment, I'm a yes on this bill, and I will continue to be. And those of us who support it, we have people and lives that we are protecting too. And that is okay to lean into. Thank you.
Representative Luck, this is your second time to speak to the bill. You have 13 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a quick retort. One of my family members survived his gunshot suicide attempt. The other, who set himself on fire, did not. Thank you.
Representative Armagost, this is your second time to speak to the bill. You have 3 minutes and 16 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's just fair to take another opportunity to talk about the fact that there are different districts being represented in here. There are different walks of life being represented in here. And those that we hear from in committee that testify on both sides of this bill and every other bill. And the fact that I don't think anyone that has been a victim of anything has ever blamed anyone. I know I've never blamed anyone or called anyone any kind of, or declared that somebody should feel like they're a permanent victim. But there are people that definitely come from both walks of life. Not even both. There's multiple approaches and perspectives of issues like this. But to make it about one side or the other is unfair. I think the biggest thing we need to focus on is everyone has their experiences, everyone has their way of preventing those experiences, and they choose that. I feel safe walking around my community because I'm armed. I feel safe going and just having a party on a street where I know I'm not going to be run down. I feel safe going into a movie theater. I feel safe going into places because of that. Other people don't feel safe because there are people like me that do carry. I get that. But the fact of the matter is, it's not our job to legislate for an entire state based on perspectives and feelings. Those feelings don't create laws that affect people on the whole in a negative way, whether they use those rights and those privileges or not. I think it's one thing that we need to realize, that there are people that, should they need the opportunity, should they need the reason to exercise their rights, it should not be further reprimanded by our state and by our legislature. So again, I will be a no, and I encourage you to be a no on this bill as well.
Representative Woog, this is your second time to speak. You have, forgive me, 9 minutes and 17 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll do much better. As we said, this bill is unconstitutional. Despite, hearing a bunch of emotions, it's unconstitutional. Therefore, we need to vote no on this. I urge a no vote.
Assistant Minority Leader Winter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. We've heard a lot this morning,
And first and foremost, as we talk about the Second Amendment, I want to level set. Is it great to be able to protect yourself based upon the Second Amendment? Yeah, that's one of the great trickle-down factors of this amendment. But before I get into what I want to talk about, there's only one reason the Second Amendment was written, and that was to keep a free nation and to keep government in check. And I think that that's lost in this building. 110% lost in this building. Whether you like to hear it that way or not, the truth is the truth. And the young men and women that founded this country, they put that in there for a reason. So as I speak about what I want to speak, I just want to get that on the record that I think sometimes we lose the spirit of what the Second Amendment actually is about. We talk about different experiences and lived experiences in this building all the time. And we've heard both sides of the coin on this. But at the end of the day, this is an attack on rural Colorado and heritage and Western way of life. This is another mile added in the rural-urban divide. The use of firearms is woven into the fabric of our story. It's part of our Western heritage. It's a rite of passage, and that may be hard for some of you to understand, but I know you've all seen the Christmas story, right? You're going to put your eye out with that thing. I mean, he tied so much to being able to get that BB gun. We live in different parts of the state. Most of you in here, I'm sure you've seen Friday Night Lights. Well, that's what the majority of my communities are. There's two gathering places in my community. There's the church, and there's the sporting event. And by living in different parts of the state, we have different activities for our children to participate in. I would tend to think about any inner city legislator would think it just, they would never in the back of their mind say, oh, well, it's a Saturday afternoon. We're as a family going to go out and shoot. Or it's a Saturday afternoon. You know, we're going to get up at 4 in the morning and sit in the duck blind and go hunting. But that's kind of our way of life. That's what we do. That's no different than kids nowadays. Oh, well, I don't even know if kids hang out in the mall anymore with online shopping, but back when I did watch TV, that's what kids did. And they all went to the mall to congregate, you know, in the inner city. Or maybe there was more events. There's more movies. But you have to understand, when I talk about small town America, it's most of the communities I represent, if you dropped your phone on the floor of the car and you reached down to pick it up, there's a chance that you'd miss it. And I don't mean that disrespectful at all. That's just what my communities are. So when I talk about, and all of my colleagues have spoke all that they're going to say about the Second Amendment and protection of life. I'm going to talk about kids in my district right now. I think it's important, so I've said this before, I travel my district and I do the Bill on the Hill and I talk to kids, and of course there's that time outside of school that they chat with me and they want to get more political, and we visit. And I will say, as a state representative in this building, I think 2 out of 3 years we've had kids march down into this Capitol and they've given their point of view and how they feel about guns and gun violence. The students where I'm from, first and foremost, they've got to get up in the morning and do chores, and then they go to school all day, and half of them don't even get home from sporting practice until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And they don't have the luxury of amassing and coming down to the Capitol to say that these rights that are being stripped away from them are important rights to them. Their voices are not any less different than any other kid's voice that comes in this building. I see how, I did it myself yesterday in agricultural committee. We had a kid that came in, didn't expect to testify, raised his hand, got up and testified. And that's one thing I will say about this group of people is everybody does a good job of telling kids, thank you for being part of the process. Your voices are important. Thank you for being here and being heard. And I think it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. That's one thing that we should all agree on bipartisanly is encouraging the youth to get involved in politics. But my kids don't have the liberty and the ability just to come up here like that. It's hard to drive 3 or 4 hours to voice your opinion. And this isn't political speak. I have kids ask me all the time, you know, Representative Winter, I like to do shooting sports. I like to go hunting. Like I said, there's hardly even internet in part of my district where kids could even game on the internet. So this is a true hobby of theirs. These are the activities that our youth are involved in. I spent my whole childhood toting a gun around our property, hunting, fishing. And for some of you that may seem odd, but that's our way of life. And I think that that's important to preserve. We pride ourselves in rural Colorado. We teach our children personal responsibility, ethics, values. the sanctity of life, God, family, country. These are kids at 7 or 8 years old that are running tractors and driving big trucks, branding cattle and riding horseback, sometimes a couple miles away from their parents. They complete tasks in rural Colorado that I think some adults in the city would be afraid to do. And that's no disrespect. But we put a lot of responsibility on this youth because the farm don't run without the family. And we teach our kids to be independent. But legislation like this, even though I know that the sponsors, how do I say this? In their heart, they're well-meaning with this. But it also signals to my kids that they're not smart enough, they don't have the ethics, they don't have the values to have that responsibility. And I'm not saying that for political posturing. I hear these things, and I come back and I speak the truth from my district. The urban voices of the youth aren't any more important than the rural voices. And what's that teaching them? I mean, really, what's that teaching them? That your way of life and your geographic location makes you any less of a citizen of this state because you don't land in the majority? And that adults 5 hours away have the ability to strip you of the rights and the things that you like to do and that you've learned generationally through your family? And I respect some of the stuff that was said up here. And I understand that there's fears. But that goes back to, I think I started saying this last year, you do you and let us do us. If you have reasons that you need to pass this legislation, then pass it for your constituents. If your constituents are calling for something like this, you own the building, pass it. And I know that we debated like crazy Friday. It was a good spirited debate. And when I ran the amendment to exclude our House districts, I know it was kind of perceived as a joke, but it wasn't perceived as a joke. Not to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was fun that we all got to get up and debate it, and it added some levity to the room because we know sometimes you can cut the tension with a knife in this building. But in all reality, there's some truth to that. Because as your constituents sent you up here to do things, well, so did ours. And even though we may be in the minority by numbers, the amount of land mass and the people this affects does make a difference. Your constituents sent you up here to pass legislation like this, and my constituents sent me up here to fight legislation like this. Big city fixes exasperate rural problems. Guilt by association is not fair. We talk about lived experiences in this bill all the time. We talk about culture. And I do my best to uphold all of that. I try to be open-minded. I try to listen to everything. Actually being in this building has done me a lot of good personally because it's brought me to the city to open mind up and listen to all different points of view. And I'm grateful for that. But it has to be reciprocated. I know you all listen to me. All I ask you is to hear me. Because at the end of the day, this does affect my constituents, and at the end of the day, it does affect my youth. And I know we're all going to push the button, and it's going to fall where it's going to fall. But I just ask that you pass judgment on all these bills and this legislation no different than if you actually had constituents, your district, that were asking you to think the opposite of this.
AML Winter, you have 50 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I will continue to get up here and fight for all of my constituents. It doesn't matter if they're 2 or 20. And I will tell you right now that this does affect my constituents. And believe it or not, a lot of these activities that my youth are involved in keeps them out of trouble. It's a hobby. So I'd ask you to at least consider that when you think about voting on legislation like this. Because it does affect people outside the Gold Dome, and it does affect people outside the bubble. And I'd feel remiss if I didn't come stand for the youth of my district. So I ask you for a no vote. Thank you.
Minority Leader Puglisi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the vigorous debate. someone had said that I might not be able to articulate my closing quite as in the way that some others might, and I think that's valid. So I'm going to keep my closing short. I appreciate all of the words of my caucus and all of the work that you've done to bring the voices of your constituents to the table. I also want to acknowledge the work of the majority leader and the bill sponsor from Jefferson County for coming to us with amendments and trying to work through some of these issues while obviously we can't get there. I do appreciate especially the work that we have done on domestic violence. And while for some it's not far enough, and I think we could all agree to that, it's definitely a step, and I appreciate that. I did want to address the one thing that I think my caucus had not said that I just want to be very brief and clear on. I am not a permanent victim. I am a permanent survivor. And I have the ability to defend myself, and I want my children to have that ability too. Please vote no. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1133 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Bradfield, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Bradfield votes no. Representative Wilford, that is a $6 fine. Please close the machine.